Hello there and welcome to our webinar today. This is all about salary sacrifice pensions in Sage 50 Payroll. My name's Duncan. I'll be hosting and presenting the session today, and I am joined in the background by my colleague Sarah, who's standing by ready and waiting to answer any of your questions. Let's now take a look at what we'll cover in the webinar. So we'll start with a brief introduction explaining what a salary sacrifice pension is and how that differs from a non-salary sacrifice pension. We're then going to show some demonstrations on how to set up and assign a salary sacrifice pension scheme to your employee, taking a closer look at the key settings, as well as pay element settings, which define which of your payments are pensionable and also included in salary sacrifice calculations. We'll then take a look at where to check and amend pension contributions for these types of scheme, as it does work slightly differently to a non-salary sacrifice pension. And we're going to finish with a relatively new feature, which can automatically calculate employer NI savings and add that to the employer contribution. So we'll show you how that works and how to set it up. So that's what we've got lined up for you. And we'll get straight on to our introduction to salary sacrifice pension schemes. Now, a salary sacrifice scheme works slightly differently to other pension schemes, as it will deduct the employee's pension contribution from an employee's gross pay in the form of a salary sacrifice rather than a direct contribution to their pension. Now, because this is deducted before tax and national insurance, it means that the employee and employer both benefit from paying less national insurance. Whereas with a non-salary sacrifice scheme, the employee would only really benefit from the tax relief. So with those national insurance savings, you might choose to pay more into your employees' pension pots. It means the employees would have slightly increased take-home pay because they won't be paying national insurance on the amount of the salary sacrifice. You could use the savings to offer an improved benefits package, for example, or you might choose to reinvest the money you've saved back into your own business. So plenty of options for you on what to do with some money you might save with such a scheme. Now, there are quite a few rules around salary sacrifice schemes, and you can read the detail on some of that key legislation from the link that I've provided there on the slide. But I do want to call out two key considerations with salary sacrifice schemes. And the first is in relation to national minimum wage. So it's really important to understand that a salary sacrifice must not reduce your employee's pay below the national minimum wage. So if you have minimum wage employees, or if they're paid slightly above minimum wage, it's likely that a salary sacrifice pension could take them under the minimum wage and therefore would not be suitable for their use. Now, if you do have hourly paid staff, there is a national minimum wage check feature in Sage 50 Payroll, but if you use that, please be aware that that can't factor in salary sacrifice pension deductions into the calculation. So if you're using our minimum wage check, you will see a message that pops up when you're in enter payments, just advising you that the employee has a salary sacrifice scheme, and it's up to you to check that that hasn't reduced their wage below the minimum wage. If you don't use the check, obviously you would still do the calculation manually, and it's your responsibility to ensure that a salary sacrifice doesn't take them below that minimum. The other thing to be aware of is that salary sacrifices can't be deducted from statutory payments. So a statutory payment is a minimum amount that must be paid for things like sickness or parental leave. And as such, with a salary sacrifice pension scheme, you can't include any statutory payments in the pensionable pay. So if you have employees on statutory leave, such as maternity leave, you may need to make manual adjustments to your salary sacrifice pension contributions. And we'll cover how you can do that a little bit later on in the webinar. If you're ever unsure on how to handle pension contributions while an employee is on statutory leave, we would strongly recommend that you check the rules of your pension scheme with your pension provider. And once you've got guidance from them If you need any help with setting up the adjustments in your software, the team here at Sage will be able to help. So that's just a little bit about how salary sacrifice pensions work. But what we're going to focus on for most of this webinar is how to implement this in Sage 50 Payroll. So what we're going to cover first is setting up and assigning a salary sacrifice scheme. And in order for this to run smoothly, you will need to know the key settings for your pension scheme, which will determine how the contributions are actually calculated. So first thing to check is whether it's a qualifying scheme for automatic enrolment. And if it is, you could use this when enrolling your staff when they meet the auto-enrollment criteria. You then need to establish what earnings are pensionable for both the salary sacrifice and the employer contribution. So is it basic pay only, or is it qualifying earnings that count towards pensionable pay? So qualifying earnings is a reference to most types of pay between a lower and upper threshold. So again, your pension scheme will be able to confirm what earnings are pensionable. You need to know what the contributions are. So are they fixed or percentages? In most cases, they will be percentages. And what are the percentage rates that apply to both the salary sacrifice and the employer's contribution? And make a note of any references that you get from your employer. So it might be known as a provider reference, employer reference, employer account number, etc. So very similar information that you would need to set up any other type of pension scheme, but there is a key setting to make it a salary sacrifice scheme, which will mean that a salary sacrifice is taken from your employee, and that will then be combined with the employer contribution so that the contribution to the pension is the total of the salary sacrifice plus the employer's percentage. So I'm going to take you through the steps to set up your pension scheme. This works in a very similar way to non-salary sacrifice schemes. So from the company tasks, we're going to go into pension scheme, going to select a scheme that we want to set up, and then we can click edit to apply the relevant settings. And then we'll take a look also at the pay element settings, and I'll help you understand which of the settings need to be ticked to include payments in both the pension calculation for the employer's pension and the salary sacrifice calculation for the employee. So let's take a closer look at this as a demo. So I will just bring the slides down and we'll jump into Sage 50 Payroll. Now, first thing I want to show you are the pension scheme settings and where to find them. So if you select the company toolbar, and if you go to pension schemes here on the left hand side, you will find that you've got up to 10 kind of default schemes that are available to customize to your own kind of settings. And if you ever need to create more than 10, there is an option to create new schemes by selecting the new button at the bottom. Now, I've got a few different types of pension schemes for this demo, but the one we're going to focus on is my salary sacrifice scheme. So if I select that and click edit, you'll see that it is assigned to at least one employee. So we're just going to click OK to that message. And then we've got the scheme settings laid out on the details, employee, employer, and provider tabs. So first thing we have is the description, and I've simply entered SalSac pension. You can enter a description of your choice. Makes it easy to identify that for you. You've then got the type of scheme. So if you know that your scheme is one of the listed types here, you can select it from the drop-down list. Some of these types of scheme are no longer in use. So the contracted out schemes have now been abolished. Or if none of these scheme types apply to your scheme, you can simply select other, as I have, and then you can apply your own custom settings. Now the SCOT is no longer relevant, so you'd leave that blank. And in this example, my scheme is a qualifying scheme for auto-enrollment, which means I can use it to automatically enroll my eligible staff. And we've ticked the box here to indicate that it is a qualifying scheme. Now, the setting underneath is a setting to use qualifying earnings for pensionable pay. So that is the reference to earnings between a lower and upper threshold, which are set in legislation, and it would include payments such as overtime and bonuses. But for this particular scheme that I've set up, we are only going to use basic pay or salary for the salary sacrifice calculation, and it'll be based on all of that salary from the first pound earned rather than the kind of banded earnings between lower and upper. But if your scheme uses qualifying earnings, you would simply tick this box underneath. The next settings would be set to 0, and then we have the salary sacrifice setting towards the bottom. So I've selected the box to say this is a salary sacrifice scheme, and you'll see just underneath there is the option to add the employer NI savings, which we're going to come back to later in today's webinar. So we've got salary sacrifice scheme selected, and we're now ready to enter our default contribution rates. So let's start with the employee. So selecting the employee tab, you'll notice that it says sacrifice rather than contribution, because officially this isn't a pension contribution. It's the employee agreeing to sacrifice some of their gross pay in exchange for an increased employer pension contribution. So the employees in this case are contributing 5% of their basic pay. So we've got the sacrifice set up as a percentage of 5%. Now notice that these other settings are not available to change, as you can't apply salary sacrifice to statutory payments. So none of those boxes are selected. And for tax relief, we are reducing the gross salary rather than giving tax relief on the pension contribution. So that is the setting automatically applied to salary sacrifice schemes. For the employer, we set up their contribution to be the amount that the employer is funding themselves. So in this case, we've put 3%, but in effect, and you'll see this when we look at the contributions, it will be an 8% employer contribution because it will add on the salary sacrifice amount that's been taken from the employee. So in the scheme settings, we just put the employer's amount of 3%. And when you look at your pension reports, once you've assigned this to your employees, the employer contribution will also include the salary sacrifice. And with the employer contribution, you are able to include statutory payments in the calculation. And for this demonstration, we do have those boxes ticked. Final tab is just to note your provider details. So if you have got a provider's reference, you would pop it in here just for your own records. You can enter the kind of provider details and administrator details as required. So that is my pension scheme set up. I'm going to click OK, which would save any changes that I've made to those settings. And what I want to move on to next is to show you the pay element settings so that we can define which payments are included in salary sacrifice calculations and which payments are used for employer pension calculations. So to find the pay element settings, you stay on the company tasks here on the left-hand side, and then we go into pay elements. Now you'll see I have 5 payments set up, so quite a simple setup in this example. And to edit the settings, you simply choose a payment and you would click Edit. And then in the section under this payment is subject to, you've got your pensionable kind of settings here in the middle. So you would mark whether a payment counts towards qualifying earnings. To the main, an additional voluntary contribution to the pension, which for a salary sacrifice scheme basically means the employer pension. And then this setting on the left-hand side is for the employee. So it's to include this payment in salary sacrifice pension only. Now, I also use the built-in salary pay element, which is automatically subject to salary sacrifice pensions. So the way we've got this set up is that we've got our basic pay and salary included in salary sacrifice. We've also got that marked as pensionable. But if I look at other payments, such as bonus and overtime, for my scheme, I have not included them in pensionable pay, and I've also not included them in salary sacrifice. But notice they are still counting as qualifying earnings, which becomes relevant when you do pension assessments, and also for schemes that use qualifying earnings for pensionable pay. So that's just a quick look at some of my pay element settings. I just want to show you or share a couple of tips on how you can check all of these settings in one place, and also how you can make changes to the pay element settings globally if, for example, you did need to flag kind of multiple payments as pensionable or included in salary sacrifice. So if I just click OK to come out of my pay element settings, I'm going to go into the reports option at the top of the screen here. And within the company folder, there's a report called payment types, which I've added to my favorites. And if I just run this to preview, what we can then see on screen, and I will try to zoom in a little bit for you, is we can see all of the pay element settings in one place. So the way I've got this set up is that I've got basic pay as pensionable. So we've got Y in the pension and AVC column, but everything else I have got as non-pensionable. For the salary sacrifice setting, again, I've got basic, pensionable, and everything else non-pensionable. And for qualifying earnings, I've got everything except expenses flagged as qualifying earnings. Now, if you have a scheme that uses qualifying earnings for pensionable pay and you operate a salary sacrifice scheme, so you want to include things like bonuses and overtime in the salary sacrifice calculation, you will also need to flag those pay elements as salary sacrifice pension only. So the employer contribution will look at the qualifying earnings flag. The employee contribution will look at the salary sacrifice setting, but it will restrict those earnings to the lower and upper thresholds. So if you did need to make changes to pay element settings, you can do it on an individual basis from company and pay elements, like I showed you earlier. Or another tip, if you want to make changes to the settings globally, you can go to Tasks, Global Changes, Pay Elements, and then Payments. And then you can select the required payments, like so, and you would, if you need to, be able to set salary sacrifice and pension boxes, like so, set, set, set. And if I click OK, that would apply that setting to the selected payments. So you might need to review pay element settings if you've got a scheme that uses qualifying earnings for pensionable pay. But in my example, it is just the basic pay that's going to be used for both pension and salary sacrifice. So that's pretty much it on the setup, but let's just recap some of those steps before we take a look at the contributions themselves. So we set it up from company and then pension schemes. You can either edit an existing scheme or you can create a new one. We've also had a look at the pay element settings. So that was company and pay elements. The key settings are highlighted there on the slide. Qualifying earnings is a reference to salary, wages, commission, bonuses and overtime, as well as all statutory payments. And as a general rule, if a payment is subject to tax and national insurance, it would usually be also included in qualifying earnings. Now, the other thing we're going to look at here is assigning a pension scheme to your employees. Now, if an employee is being auto-enrolled into your pension scheme and you use the pensions module, you would never need to do this manually. So you would run a pension assessment that would identify the employee as eligible, and it will automatically enroll them into your default scheme in your pensions module settings. And if you want to learn more about the pensions module, we've got some other webinars in this series that explain more about that. But if you don't use the pensions module, or perhaps you have existing staff in a pension that are switching to a salary sacrifice scheme, this is where you would assign it manually, either in the employee record, if it's for an individual employee, or you could also use global changes. So we're going to take a look at where you can assign the pension scheme and also where you can set the contributions at employee level. So we'll just bring these slides down once again. And I am going to start with an existing employee that already has this scheme assigned. So I'm just going to show you where you'd find it. So if I go into employee 3 in my example and select the pensions tab, you can see the name of the pension scheme already assigned. So it is a salary sacrifice pension. And if I go to manage schemes, just down here, you can see where it's been added. That was done back in April last year. And if I click edit, you can see I've set the employee contribution to be a 5% salary sacrifice, and the employer contribution is set to 3%. So this matches the scheme defaults. If your scheme allows your employees to increase their contribution, you can, of course, amend these percentages or set them to fixed amounts from this area here. The Pension Information tab just confirms the pension scheme settings. So this is salary sacrifice as it's reducing gross salary, and it's applied to all earnings rather than qualifying earnings. So it's all pensionable earnings, in our case, basic and salary. So that's where it's been added. Now, if, for example, you had an employee that was switching from one scheme to another, what you could do in that case, if I just pick a different employee out, is you could manage the schemes. You could edit the existing scheme and enter a left scheme date. So, for example, they might have left the scheme on the last day of 1 month. Once you've done that, you could add the salary sacrifice scheme, and you would set the join scheme date to the following day. So if you're moving people over to salary sacrifice scheme, that would be one way you could do it. Another way you could do this is using global changes. So if you want to assign a scheme to multiple employees, make a selection first, go to tasks, global changes, and then pensions. So you might get them to leave an existing scheme on a particular date, and you could add in the new scheme from the following date. So pension schemes can also be assigned globally. We can set it to be their primary scheme by ticking this box. So that is where you would go to assign the pension scheme, and it's also where you would be able to amend an individual employee's contributions. So just a quick recap on those steps. So once you're on the pensions tab, you've got the manage schemes and then add scheme. You're choosing the scheme from the scheme reference drop-down list that you want them to be in. You're confirming the join scheme date, and then if necessary, you can amend the employee's contributions within their own record if they're different to the scheme defaults. And of course, we've got the article link there if you need a reminder of those instructions. So now that we've got our scheme set up, and we've got it assigned to a few of our employees, we're now going to take a closer look at where you can check and amend pension contributions where required. And we'll start with where to check them within the Enter Payment screen as part of your usual pay run. So this slide here just summarizes where you will find the pension information. Salary sacrifice schemes are technically an employer contribution only. So on the summary tab, where you would usually see the employee's contribution, you won't see a contribution here as they've had a salary sacrifice instead. But if you press the employers button, which I will show you in the demo, That is where you will see the combined pension contribution, which includes the employer's percentage plus the amount sacrificed by the employee. Salary sacrifice is shown as a negative value in with the payments. So if you click onto the payments tab and look to the summary at the bottom, that is where you'll see the specific salary sacrifice amount. So let's take a look at that now, and I'll show you a few scenarios where you might need to kind of amend the pension contribution. So I'm going to go to my payroll tasks. I've already set my next pay date. It'll be 30th of November. Let's just select employee 3 to start with and open the enter payment screen. So this employee has a salary, £2,750. You can see at the bottom of the payments, we have the salary sacrifice, so £137.50. So that is 5% of the salary. And it means that their gross pay is reduced by this amount, meaning they're not paying tax or national insurance on this salary sacrifice amount. Looking at the summary tab, as just explained, there is no employee pension contribution to a salary sacrifice scheme. But when I click employers, we can see a pension of £220. That's the 3% the employer is contribution plus the 5% sacrificed by the employee. So £220 is actually 8% of the employee's basic pay of £2,750. Now, if you compare that with someone on a non-salary sacrifice scheme, and I'll just select employee 2 to show you the difference. They're on the exact same salary, but clicking on the summary tab, you can see the taxable pay has reduced, but the gross pay has not. We've got the same pension contribution, £137.50. So this is deducted before tax with this particular setting. And the employer's contribution is simply the employer amount. And if you just check the net pay, so everything else is identical for these employees, the amount they earn. This is how much they're getting with a non-salary sacrifice scheme, so 2163. You can see they get a bit more net pay if they're on a salary sacrifice scheme, and that of course is due to the national insurance that they've saved. We'll also have a look at how these appear on reports and payslips. So just taking a look at one of our standard payslip layouts. So first of all, non-salary sacrifice has employee and employer pension. But for the salary sacrifice employee, they've got that negative value showing the salary sacrifice amount, and the employer pension is the combined pension contribution. You can see there clearly kind of difference in their net pay. Now, if you do need to amend contributions, this might be something you need to do during periods of statutory leave. It depends on how your pension scheme works and what the pension scheme rules are. You can, of course, amend contributions within the employee record. So just to illustrate this, I have an employee who is on some statutory leave at the moment. She's on maternity leave. And when I've checked this with the pension provider, they have told me that as they're only receiving a statutory payment, we do still need to cover the full employer contribution. So what we've done in this case is I've gone to the pensions tab, I've clicked manage schemes, and then for this employee, although we've got a percentage of 3%, that won't apply to the statutory payment. And as they're only receiving a statutory payment, I've actually gone in and set the employer contribution to £200, which is the amount that is usually contributed into the pension. Now, we can't advise you how your pension scheme works and what the rules are, so you'd have to check that with your pension provider. But if you do need to override any contributions, be that the employee or employer, you can set these within the employee record. But remember, salary sacrifice can't be deducted from a statutory payment. So the overall effect of that change that I've made there, so if I go into enter payments, see I haven't got any salary entered. I'm going to click the summary tab. You can see they're on statutory maternity pay. There's no employee pension contribution, but there wouldn't be anyway because it is salary sacrifice. And for employers, it's now just showing the fixed amount that I've confirmed with the pension provider as the amount that I need to put into the pension. So that's just one example of when you might need to manually amend the pension contributions. And because we don't have any kind of pensionable pay, we're only on statutory payment, you'll see that there's no salary sacrifice being made in this case because we can't deduct a salary sacrifice from statutory pay. So that's checking and amending the contributions. So this slide summarizes where to check the contributions and enter payments. And then if you do need to make changes, either to the employee sacrifice or the employer contribution, that can be done within the employee record. And it can be set to a fixed amount where required, for example, for a period of statutory leave. So last thing we're going to cover in the webinar is around the national insurance savings. So this is one of the big perks of the salary sacrifice pension scheme, for now at least, that the employee and employer will save national insurance because the salary sacrifice is a deduction before tax and national insurance. And quite commonly, employers will choose to add their employer NI saving into the pension pot. And we've introduced a feature in version 31 where Sage 50 Payroll can automatically calculate the employer national insurance saving and then add that to the employer contribution. Now, just to be clear on this, it will always add the full employer NI saving. So it isn't possible to just reinvest part of the employer NI saving. The way the feature works is it does add it all. But if that's the way that your scheme operates, you can just select a tick box and the software will calculate the NI saving based on the salary sacrifice amount, and it will add that in to the employer contribution. So for most employees, non-directors, that will happen each pay period with the setting applied. But if you do have directors, because of the way directors' national insurance is calculated on an annual calculation, the NI saving is only calculated in the last period of the tax year. So we'll bring this to life with an example, but just to explain where you'll find the setting, it's within the pension scheme settings, and it is the tick box to add the employer NI saving to pension contribution. If you've got that selected, it'll do the calculation and add it in. If you don't have it selected, it will only contribute the percentage that you've entered for the employer. So let's take a look at that now. So first of all, without the employee NI saving, the employer NI saving, just to look at this particular employee, the total contribution is £220. That's the 5% plus the 3% that the employer is putting in, and it's based on the employee's salary of £2,750. But if I go into my pension scheme settings, just here, I'm going to edit the settings. You can see that we do have the tick box to add the employer NI savings to the pension contribution. And if we've set this all up with our pension provider, and that's the arrangement that we have, that we're going to add in the employer NI savings, we can select this box to calculate it automatically. So now that I've got that selected, let's just return to the enter payment screen for that same employee. Now there is no change to the salary sacrifice. This £137.50 is 5% of the employee's salary amount, and it's not affected by any additional payments such as overtime. So if I put overtime in, the way that we've got our pay element set up is that only salary is included in salary sacrifice. But taking a look at the employer's contribution, that has gone up from £220 to £240.63. So it's an increase of £20.63. And if I just bring a calculator up, the way that that has been calculated is we've taken the salary sacrifice amount, that's the 13750, and calculated 15%, which is the employer's NI percentage. So that's your £20.63 added onto the original contribution, and that's your 240.63. So it's worked out on the salary sacrifice amount, and it is added to the employer contribution. So hopefully a big time saver for those of you that do reinvest the full NI saving. If it is only part of the saving that you wanted to add to the contribution, it's the same workaround that has always existed. So it is to calculate the amount you want to contribute in total, and you would enter that as a fixed amount contribution. And our support guides do give a little bit of guidance on how to do that. And that support guide, as you can see, is linked to from the handout. So that has actually brought us to the end of what we're going to cover in today's webinar. But before you go, I do want to talk more about some of the further support that's coming up, in particular, the other webinars in our Pensions Discovery series. So today you've attended salary sacrifice pensions, and if you attend at least 5 of these sessions plus the quiz, you would qualify for the digital badge. And to tell you a bit more about our digital badge, I'm going to play you a quick video from our colleague Matt. So here's Matt with an update on the Pensions Discovery badge.
Get ready to earn your Pension Discovery badge with Sage 50 Payroll. Join us for our fantastic new webinar series where you'll learn everything you need to know about pensions to get you ready to confidently process pensions for your employees. With 7 live sessions and a fun learning quiz in the last session. Whether you're new to pensions or a dab hand, we have something for everyone. Here is what we've got lined up for you. Make a strong start to your pension processing with foundational knowledge on the basics of pensions and salary sacrifice pensions in Sage 50 Payroll. Explore how pension contributions are calculated and how your employees are assessed for automatic enrolment. We'll also take you through our 3 most popular sessions: navigating enrolment, getting started with pensions module, and using Pensions Data Exchange to send your pension data to your provider with ease. And lastly, backed by popular demand, test your knowledge with our Pensions Discovery quiz to see what you've learned across the sessions. Now, how do you get your hands on your Pensions Discovery digital badge? Simply attend 5 out of 7 of the live sessions and our quiz to earn your badge. And don't forget, you get free access to our new Accredible portal to manage your badges, so you can quickly and easily share your badge on socials for everyone to see. Don't miss out. Secure your spot and join us for an unforgettable learning experience by signing up at sage.co.uk/webinars. We'll see you there.
So that was just a bit more detail there on the badge. So get yourself signed up to some of our sessions. We are repeating each session, so these are running through to the 17th of December, and we'd love to see you at these sessions to get yourself that digital badge. Just to make you aware of other support resources, you can access our help centre at sage.co.uk/help. Just follow the links to Sage 50 Payroll, where you can search our knowledge base, read the support guides, check out the upcoming webinars, and also find contact details for our support team. So it's also available by clicking the help icon in your software. Another great learning resource is Sage University, which you can access at sageu.com. From there, you'll find e-learning courses, online certification, and bite-sized learning on a range of payroll and other kind of software topics. So you can access that at sageu.com. So I've got a few minutes left of the scheduled time, so I am going to go on to mute briefly to help Sarah out with any remaining questions. Don't forget to download the handouts before you leave if you'd like to keep hold of those, as well as copying and pasting any Q&A into another document if you want to keep that. We will be sending you a follow-up email with a link to the recording of today's session, so watch out for that in your inbox in about an hour's time. But I'll go on to mute to help with the questions, and I will be back to say goodbye when we are ready to wrap up the webinar. So I will speak to you shortly. Hello again, everybody. We are nearly out of time, and I think we've managed to answer the majority of questions that you've sent through. So thanks so much for engaging with us and for keeping Sarah busy during the webinar today. We are about to close the session, so when we do so, you will be invited to take a survey. We'd love to know what you thought of today's session, what you found useful, or any areas for improvement. And we do read all of your feedback and use it to improve these sessions moving forward. Don't forget about that follow-up email. It'll arrive in your inbox later on today, and that will include a link to the recording of today's session. So with that said, I'm going to say goodbye. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you on some of our other pensions webinar in the near future. But it is goodbye for now.